Hey YouTube, this is Nashtaters. Welcome back to another episode of War of the Visions. So today we're going to do the should you save or should you summon video for Ildyra. Alright. Before we begin this video, let's do a disclaimer. First and foremost, everything I say in these videos are going to be my opinions and my opinions only. Another thing I really want to make sure people understand is it doesn't really matter what I say. And I think it doesn't really matter what a lot of people say. Most likely, you're probably going to make a decision on your own anyways. But my goal is to give you some information that I feel is very important or perhaps good for you and maybe helping you making your final decision. So let's go ahead and talk about Ildyra. First and foremost, she's going to be the very first mathematician, or as they call in this game, arithmetician. Back in the days when Final Fantasy Tactics was first released, they had a calculator slash mathematician type of unit in which the unit can do damage according to where enemy units or allies are according to different things, such as even numbers, odd numbers, where they are at in terms of height, etc., etc. So it could be a very powerful unit if used correctly, and also can actually be detrimental to your team if not used correctly. A lot of it has to do with RNG, planning, execution, etc. The unit they're trying to represent in this game, in Ildyra, is going to be, in my opinion, super overpowered. Because one thing that's great about War of the Visions is that it is very balanced. The developers are very good at hiring people who do a good job in designing units. And to that, I want to thank y'all. But let's get into what I think about this unit. Now, in my previous video on last Friday, I made the comparison of her to Mediana. If you haven't done so, go ahead and check it out because it talks about a lot of actual in-depth coverage in terms of what she does that she can do for you in terms of bringing you strength and whatnot to your account. It's very important to understand that you as an individual player must assess how much time you're actually putting into this game. And once you figure that out, then you'll quickly learn that perhaps replacing older farmer units isn't something perhaps should be on your agenda. But before we get to that, let's get to another thing that I want to make sure people understand. My videos, generally speaking, are aimed for an audience of free-to-play players because I don't like to use the word pay to win anymore, so I'll call them spenders. But they will spend regardless of what people say, what information's out there. And they also have the ability to access resources that free-to players do not, simply by clicking the I accept button in whichever application store that you use. So with that going forward, people need to understand there are multiple factors to your decision making. One, obviously I mentioned, time. Two, your resources. Can you actually afford this unit is the biggest question that comes to mind. We just dealt with one of the most powerful, if not biggest, event that this game has faced, which was Final Fantasy Tactics Banner Part 2. Many of us, I would say most of us perhaps, were gearing and saving up for one of two units, either Agrias or Delita, and perhaps are trying to finish off Ramza and or Orlando. That's going to eat into a lot of your resources. As you can see, look at me. I only have 8,920 gems left. But I am done with completing the banner, and for me, it's really just about now worrying about all the units that I have. And the biggest concern I have about the Ildyra banner really is, do I need to replace my Mediana is my question. Ildyra is very good because she doesn't have animation in her limit break. So the question really is, does she save you a lot of time in terms of farming? And the answer is yes and no, right? In multiplayer, where most of our bulk of our farming is going to occur, the animation time, yes, it's going to be great. It's going to save you some seconds. But there are going to be many factors when it comes to multiplayer. People AFKing, people joining in and out, etc., etc. Even though that should be pretty much a constant in this formula, comparing her to Mediana. So the question really is then all about the animation and perhaps also her range on her AoE attacks. In the future, we're most likely going to be getting the quality of life change in which we can actually turn off ability effects in multiplayer. And I think at that point, it's kind of moot point to say that Ildyra is going to be the best farmer. I want to go back to the example of using units as cars and what I like to call the trifecta as the real end game of this game. Equipment, espers, and vision cards. One example I will always go back to is I farmed with 2 whales in Ochu Challenge Brutality. And the 2 whales were doing massive damage with their Medianas. And me and another player's Medianas were just not doing enough damage. And I look at everything, right? The trifecta. Our equipment, espers, and vision cards just not as good as theirs. So I think the key understanding of this is, do you really want to replace your car, in this case Mediana, with a brand new car? Even though, ideally, you should be working to improve your car. Perhaps increase the performance of your engine, add better wheels, add stronger whatever. After this banner, Final Fantasy Tactics, we're getting Ildyra, which some spinners consider to be game-changing. Personally, I don't. And the reason being is you don't, technically speaking, need her. Yes, she can improve your farming timing, but you have to ask yourself, what are you gonna do with all that excess time you save? You're just gonna end up farming more. And we're all gonna eventually get to the point where you're gonna have overabundance of resources in terms of perhaps equipment pieces, recipes, and things like that, where you won't even need to be able to spend them. And they're just gonna sit there. Like for example, I have thousands upon thousands of different parts for jobs. I will never be able to spend them. I will have enough parts to level up so many units in this game coming out in the future. Bear in mind, we're approaching 6 months anniversary very soon. Chances are they're probably gonna give us more free pulls, maybe even summon tickets in which specifically you can select units. Now, I understand that if you pull her tomorrow, you can get lots of shards to build her quickly, but those shards will still cost you gems. As a free-to-play players, people like to talk about planning and mapping for the future. And while those videos are quite entertaining, I don't think really that they're useful. Because one thing as a free-to-play player I'm learning is that no matter how much I plan and no matter how much I prepare, I'm always gonna run out of gems. There's just not ways to gain gems quickly in this game. And regardless of what you plan, you are still gonna be going against RNG, which happens to be a big ass bitch. Because we all heard horror stories of people who saved 60, 50,000 gems and trying to get units that they want and they don't. And unfortunately, that is the reality of the game. Gacha system itself is a gambling system. Even though you may have tons saved, tons planned, a wrench can be thrown into that very quickly. And I think the timing of release of Ildyra, in my honest opinion, should have been pushed back even further. Given the fact that Final Fantasy Tactics was such an important aspect of this game. If they've simply just added a few units that's already in the game for the next couple of weeks, it brings no harm to the game. Because many people at this point are just still diligently working on the units that they have. And now for my final thoughts. I think timing is in fact the most important part in this determination of should you save or should you summon. Because if only they would have pushed her back a few more weeks, in my opinion, then I think I would have strongly recommend everyone to summon her. I think she is good enough unit to be added to everyone's team because you can't have too many farmers, to be honest. And saving time is what I always value the most, and she does just that. But the fact remains is, most of us simply just cannot afford her at this time. And that is a sad reality right now. And I think most of us are gonna get her eventually, but again, don't fret if you don't get her because you already have Mediana. And until they give us the animation change, I think they're going to be pretty much going in tandem in terms of being the best in terms of farming. I think that's all the time I have for this video. If you decide to pull, good luck. And if you feel like that everything I say makes perfect sense, then by all means, work harder on your trifecta to improve the unit that you already have. Until next time, take care of yourself, all your loved ones, cherish your time, and Nashtaters and his family out.